they missed a huge opportunity to give us a character I do care about. They gave us Imhotep, they gave us the mummy in his bandages as he appears for a very brief portion of the movie. They should have given us an Ardath Bey, which is Boris Karloff in the scarred up, wrinkly makeup. It would have just been perfect. An Ardath Bey would have been the right character, and Frank Wemple is not the right character to put in this set. But where the hell is an Ardath Bey figure? Because that is Karloff for most of the movie. And looking back, nobody has made an Ardath Bey in the 7 or 8 inch scale. Sideshow's only done the mummy in bandages. Diamond Select's only done the mummy in bandages. And I understand this is the most iconic look, but as a fan of the movie, I would love to get that other very, very cool look of Karloff in plastic. But the one I would want more than any of those ties right in with the mummy here. I would love to get an Ardath Bey figure. I would be super excited to get that version of my collection. So on the off chance Diamond Select is listening and paying attention to me for advice for future waves, Ardath Bey, come on, do it. I would really like to see them do an Ardath Bey figure. Trick or Treat Studios bothered to put out an Ardath Bey mask along with their mummy mask, so maybe that is a trend in the right direction and we can actually get him in figure form. Maybe not the best action figure because it's a man in a robe, so you're gonna limit some articulation just by default, but come on, I think it would be cool to have. Finally, today on Outside the Box Reviews, we're taking a look at the NECA Universal Monsters Ultimate Ardath Bey figure. I know I've been asking for this figure for a long time, but when it was teased, I honestly thought it wasn't going to happen. Like, it just felt like one of those things that was going to be shown at one toy fair or something and then never mentioned again. But then suddenly it went up for pre-order, and then really shortly after, people started finding it in the bloody disgusting section of Walmart, which is a weird phrase to say. It's been amazing that we kind of have a dedicated horror collectibles section at Walmart lately. And like some of the previous figures that have been featured there, this was kind of a first to market release. So as far as I'm aware, Walmart's are getting this thing first, and then other retailers will get it a little bit later. And this showed up on Walmart shelves alongside that Ultimate 50th Anniversary Leatherface. And I was at a Walmart as soon as I could be there to pick one up because I've been waiting on this thing too long to risk not getting it right away. So was the wait worth it? Let's take a closer look. Ardath Bey comes with 5 human hands. So we have 3 right hands and 2 left hands. In the center here, we have his 2 kind of relaxed hands. They are pretty well detailed. They have like kind of the wrinkles and everything, like his skin is decaying and rotten, but still relatively human. We of course have the scarab ring on the middle finger of all of the right hands there, which is a nice gold with a little bit of like turquoise going on in the middle of it. For his alternate left hand, it's just kind of a wider fit hand or wider grip hand. You could probably use this with like the oil lamp or maybe even holding the scroll if it's rolled up. Then for his alternate right hands, we have this tight gripping hand that's meant to hold the dagger, and then this kind of awkward shaped hand with the fingers pointed out, which is really primarily there for him to hold the cane. It's very similar to the Dracula hand that we got for a similar purpose. But I think he sometimes does a similar hand pose when he's doing his hypnosis in the film, so you could probably use it for that as well. Flipping the hands over, you get a little better look at the wrinkles on the palms and everything. They are nicely detailed. I mean, they could have probably just thrown some regular human hands in here and called it a day, but I'm really glad they went the extra mile and gave us these textured ones that really match the character. And just to flip them around one more time to show the underside of them, one thing I really did want to point out here is the tight gripping hand here. The fingers actually are connected into the palm, so you're very much limited into how you can put stuff in that hand just because you can't extend that grip out any further. It is as tight as it could possibly be permanently. Ardath Bey also comes with a pair of kind of decrepit hands. Really, they're his mummy hands. And these are really more for his portrayal with his alternate heads, where he is in his last moments of the film and kind of decaying away. These again are nicely detailed, even more wrinkly and gross looking than the other ones. We still have that scarab ring detail on the right hand as well. And then if I bring in the hand from my actual mummy figure, you can see that is a lot more gray. So these are still a little more like the living mummy look and kind of just an in-between from the human hands or the more human hands and the fully mummified hand. So I like that paint detail as well. Flipping them over, more detail there on the bottom. I like they kind of gave him this like dusty look on top of that purpley weird flesh tone. And I should have pointed out on the other ones, but the detail of the ring does continue around, so he still has gold on the underside of the finger. And there's a little bit more detail on that ring. I mean, it's super tiny, so you're not going to get like high detail scarab stuff on there, but it has enough to really give it the impression of what it was in the film. For accessories, we get just a few. We get the oil lamp. There are several of these at the end scene of the film, but it's this little golden, almost boat-looking thing with a sculpted flame coming out of it. The flame is painted on. It's not like a translucent orange plastic or anything, which would have been nice, but it works okay for what it is. Flip it around, they did paint the inside to kind of give it that oil look. And I kind of like the bendy, organic feel of the flame here. Like, it feels like somebody's walking around with it and the flame's kind of flickering in there. And just like in the film, the flame is kind of offset, so it has the part where you'd hold it and then the flame's kind of further away from you. And the boat kind of has like a flat bottom on it, and there's some weathering over the gold to make it look more aged. We also get the sacrificial dagger. This is really cool looking. It's very like pitted and worn looking. It's kind of a bluish gray with some darker spots in it. I think it's supposed to look like it's made out of iron, like old iron. But, I don't know, it's a little maybe too blue to me. It is a cool looking piece. It looks very similar to the prop in the movie, which was a very kind of rough hewn dagger, so it works for what it is. And I'd say let's flip it around, look at the underside, but it went flying when I tried to do that, and I'm not sure if this is the side that I had up before, or maybe that after flipping around again. And I'm just realizing now, zoomed in, it actually kind of looks like there are some like characters carved into it, like some kind of spell, but that may just be, I don't know. I can't even really tell if it's supposed to be there or not. We also get Ardath Bey's walking stick. While his other accessories really fit in with him at the end of the film, which is what this look he's in is based off of, this is more from his first appearance in the movie. His costume is slightly different when you see him with this cane. This is also just a redo of the walking stick we got with the Dracula figure, the second Dracula release, I believe, the Carfax Abbey. But it's nicely enough detailed. They did do a different paint on it because that other one was a black and white one, essentially. This has nice gold in the top and bottom, like a nice rich wood color for the middle part. Flip it around a little bit. Not a whole lot to see here, but it does look good. And then our last accessory is one that kind of confuses me. So in the listing, I think this is said to be the Scroll of Thoth, which is an accessory we already got with the accessory set. And this, as far as I can tell, is not what it looks like at any point in the movie. The scroll we got previously, you can match up to the film. You see it at several points. And, I mean, this was correct. This is a... Oops. And, I made mine set to roll up just so I could display it kind of closer to more how it is in the film. But, like, it is a much longer piece than what we have. It's about the same height. Actually, a little bigger. So I don't really know what this scroll is supposed to be. I rewatched the movie, and unless I missed it, I did not see this in there. Now, granted, this is probably nice if you're trying to do, like, just a simple tabletop, like he's looking at it on a tabletop like they have in their promo pictures for the character. Especially if you did like mine, rolled up the other one, which is kind of unwieldy now. This is just a much more simple thing to display, but it just kind of seems like an odd choice to me. The kind of hieroglyphics or paintings or whatever is technically on here. I think I said in one of my previous reviews, I don't really know ancient Egypt stuff enough to know what this is exactly in terms of what you'd say was drawn on here. But looking at them, like, this art looks a little familiar, and it's a mirror image of the backdrop that we got with the accessory set. At least a section of it. We only have like 4 characters on the backdrop of the accessory set, and this one does continue on that drawing way further on either side, but it really is just that repeated again. Ardath Bey holds his walking stick relatively well. It's a little awkward putting it into his hand just with that shape of that hand where you have to kind of rest the one part underneath his thumb. It's basically kind of the knob at the top of the walking stick, and you have to put one part of it behind his thumb, and then his finger kind of rests alongside the rest of it. But once you get it figured out, it fits in there fairly well. You do have to lean him a little bit to get it to really like touch the ground, like he's actually using it. But it's nothing terrible, and I think if you were really walking with something like this, you probably would kind of have a bit of a lean to how you were standing. Just to zoom in a little bit, this is how he holds it, where you kind of see that thumb wrapped around the back, and then his index finger kind of following along with the walking stick. So looking at this a little further, I think the hand that holds the cane is also the hand they intend you to hold the oil lamp in. I was essentially using the wider grip right hand, but that really holds better onto the back of the lamp where the flame is. Looking more at the movie, I realize he's holding it from this kind of narrow point. So this hand, you can use that curved thumb to kind of loop into the handle point. It is not a super secure grip. I honestly had to like put him down and put it into his hand, even just trying to like move him from one table to another. With the accessory in his hand, it would fall all over the place. So honestly, I'm probably just going to have this like resting near him in my display. Probably not going to be holding it. He can, it's just not a super tight grip. For the dagger, it will fit in his gripping hand really easily. I really like that they made this hand with the thumb kind of extended and almost capping off the grip, like when he holds the knife towards the end of the movie. It is a little difficult to get the knife in the hand with the way the sleeves are. I had to take the hand off, put the knife in, then slide it back into the figure. But once you do that, he will hold it just fine. He can also hold it right way up. This is a little awkward with the way his thumb is, because it just feels like it's odd to have him resting it against the blade like that, but it is an option. And I believe there's a scene in the film where he kind of holds the dagger in his hands like this, almost like a ceremonial kind of thing. And if you put the open hands on him, he can do that as well. We get 3 different head sculpts with Ardath Bey. The first one is pretty much the standard head we see him with throughout the movie. It's Boris Karloff, made to look a little bit wrinkly and gross. So we have kind of these like pulled lines throughout his face. It's almost like his skin is dehydrated, or I know I've heard some suggestion that it's the bandages that are like fused onto his flesh, since we see him buried with the bandages on his face and they kind of aren't there later on. I think they did a really great job capturing this. The flesh tone on it looks pretty good. There's kind of a purpley wash around certain areas that kind of makes it look more old and decrepit. His eyes have that very intense Karloff stare. There's a nice gloss on them as well, giving them some life. The hair is decently detailed. The eyebrows actually look pretty darn good. The hairline has a little bit of slop on it, as is pretty normal. Kind of say the same about his fez up there. There's a little bit of flesh tone on the bottom of the fez. There's a little bit of the red from the fez on the black tassel there on the side. Not perfect, but it's alright. One bad thing you can see here on the white collar around his neck is there's definitely been some paint rub off of the clothing of the character onto the head. This is happening, I think, on all the heads. It really doesn't help that they painted that robe a kind of baby turd brown, so it looks kind of gross. Continue rotating around, you see the hair detail in the back. They did add a nice little texture to the fez as well, giving it a different look than the skin. You kind of have some more wrinkly flesh behind the ear there. And then you can kind of see going around the lower part with the neck, there is a collar on there, and then some kind of cloth detail for the rest of that. The other 2 heads we have are only seen very briefly in the film. They're both for the death scene at the end of the movie as he decays. And truly, there's not a whole lot more you would probably want to do with Ardath Bey's face. So having these is a cool thing to kind of make him a little bit more monstrous. I really like this one. He's got his eyes closed. It kind of just an exaggerated version of the other face where the wrinkles are a lot deeper. Also, his flesh tone is kind of darker, and then there's some dry brushed highlights of even darker, more decayed looking flesh over top of it. I like how the nose is kind of sculpted like it's rotting away, like you're going to have a more skeletal look there. And there's a dark wash throughout the whole thing to kind of bring out all those wrinkles and everything. Similar stuff going around here with the fez in terms of the line painted on there and all that. But it still does look pretty good. Mine has a little bit of excess plastic coming off the bottom of the ear, but it kind of looks like he's rotting a little bit more. The hair on the back is that kind of lighter purpley gray look that we got with the mummy itself. And actually, it's pretty close in terms of what we got with the hands for this figure. I like this touch. We don't really see the back of his head during this scene, but to kind of incorporate it more into how he looked when he was more dead at the beginning of the movie, I think it works pretty well. You can also see a lot more of that paint rub going on the cloth part around his neck there. They did actually add some more detail. The exposed bit of his neck is also kind of wrinkly and gross there, so that works. And then spin around to his other side. I think this came out really nice. And then last but not least, we have the skeletal look. So it fades from his actual face to that kind of corpse look. And I think there's really like a few different fades in there, more than the 3 stages we have here, but it's kind of very subtle and it all happens very fast in the movie. So I like that this still kind of has the flesh around the outside. Really, when they were doing the effect, they're kind of cross-fading from the center of Karloff's face down to the skull. So the outer areas were more still Karloff, and then, it's a skull image or whatever in the middle. I like that it kind of has the gross missing teeth going on there, the fully skeletized nose, Still some eyelids that are closed there. The eyebrows are still kind of looking a little human, but you can see that white of the skull coming through. Very rotted around the face. It's just not even really rotted. It really does fit with that fade effect that they did, where it's almost like it's overlaid on top of the makeup. It's like from the side of the face to behind the eyes back, it's very similar to the previous sculpt. And it's just almost like the skull is hovering there, which is really a nice touch to trying to reproduce the effect. We also have more of that paint rub on the back. The neck on the back looks pretty similar to the other one in terms of that wrinkle detail. I don't know, I really like how this looks. It's just very surreal looking. Continuing down the figure, we have his robes. The clothing they picked for this version of Ardeth Bay is from the end of the film. He has a slightly different robe that he wears when he first shows up, and I think he's wearing that in some of the earlier scenes even back at the museum. It would have been nice if they gave us a way to do the American Werewolf in London figure thing and pull the arms off and swap the robes out and have a different version. But probably asking a lot for a character that, well, I really want. I honestly don't know if it's going to be a massive seller for NECA, so I'm fine with getting this last version of him. We have kind of the black tie at the top of the robe connecting the two sides, and this kind of hollow section there where you're seeing more of the white undergarment. So it's mostly just kind of that tannish brown, but there does seem to be a little bit of a wash on there, bringing out a little bit of the detail. Spinning around the back, more of the same. You got the wrinkles going on, a couple seams and everything. The arms have this kind of big billowy look to them, and it actually looks like there's a little bit of dry brushing on them as well, with kind of a different tan color over top of them. There is some decent sculpted detail in the arms, but because they kind of billow out at the end, it does make them a little bit awkward in terms of just being an action figure. He does have a sculpted arm underneath with a little bit of a cuff around his wrist there. So it's not like some figures I've gotten like this where it just kind of goes in and then is flat and there's a magic arm sticking out of nothing. It kind of does look like his arm is coming from somewhere inside this billowy sleeve, but it is a little awkward depending on how you pose it, or you can kind of get looks where the arm is almost going against gravity or something. Around Ardath Bey's waist, we have this kind of sash belt deal going on. Almost looks like a lion for the belt buckle there and a nice gold. And then there's a lot of sculpted wrinkles around the belt section. Not a ton of paint detail. It kind of seems like it is the plain color there. Also looks like I'm missing a little bit of paint there in the back. But overall, it's fine. I like that they did include a lot of wrinkles throughout. He has this kind of front section that hangs down. It's supposed to look like multiple layers, I think. Kind of one backing the other. This is soft rubber. It doesn't come all the way up, but it does bend up. It is one piece as well, so while it's layered from the front, from the back, it is just a flat section of plastic. The lower body is all this relatively rigid, kind of lower cloak section. It's painted decently to match the top. It does seem a little bit lighter on mine than the actual top of the figure. If I pull the camera up just a little bit, you can kind of see there really does seem to be a bit of a paint discrepancy here. Flip it around and get a little bit more look there at all the different wrinkles and everything going on. Nothing too crazy going on here, not particularly interesting to talk about, but it works for the costume. And then down here at the very bottom, we can see his feet sticking out of the bottom of the robes. So you have his toes there and his sandals. Pull them off the stand, you can get a little better look at the feet there. They are detailed and everything. Honestly, a lot more care put into these than I would have expected. And this is more I thought the arms were going to be, where it's like a flat surface there, and then just kind of the little bottom cuffs of his legs coming out with the feet magically sprouting from them. Copyright stuff, and he does have peg holes in the bottom of both feet. For articulation, we have a dual ball joint at the neck, so he has the ball joint right below his actual head, and then where it connects to the body is like a double barbell ball joint deal going on. So you get a pretty decent range of motion. It'll look pretty far down. It does tend to pop off if I push him too far down there. He will look up a decent amount, but nothing too crazy. We can pivot the head side to side really well as rotate the head. The arms will spin a full 360 degrees. They will go out to the side, about 90 degrees to the body. It does look a little weird here because they are kind of flattened, so they will sit in close to the body. So when it's out, it just kind of looks really skinny, especially right when it gets to the ball joint, and that ball is a little awkward as well. The arm will bend at the elbow about 90 degrees. It will rotate. When it's bent all the way in like this, it is limited because of the sculpt. When you pull it down further, when it's more straightened out, you get a little better range of motion there. But it doesn't really easily want to spin like a full 360 or anything. The hands can swivel and then hinge depending on which way the hinge goes on the hand. We have ball joint at the waist, so he'll tilt decently far back, fair bit forward. We can pivot side to side as well as rotate. At the bottom, we have no leg articulation. We just have ball joints at the top of each ankle here. I will say these are hard to line up, and I have a really difficult time for a figure with so limited articulation to get him to stand properly. It just feels like the feet just don't want to like mush down on the ground properly and let him stand like a normal thing. For a size comparison, here he is next to his NECA Mummy self. So the height seems pretty good considering that this version now has a little bit of thin shoes on, and then of course his fez making him stand a bit taller. And for another Boris Karloff, here is the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from Abbott and Costello Meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I think is what this was from. The old Diamond Select figure. So definitely standing quite a bit taller than Ardath Bey. For just a regular person, here's our David Kessler from American Werewolf in London, standing a good bit shorter here. It's funny because Karloff wasn't a particularly tall person if I remember correctly, but the way they filmed this movie, he was like constantly on an apple box or something around every other actor, so he seemed to tower over everybody on set. And then here he is next to his sarcophagus. So we want to move the camera up just a little bit. You can see it does stand quite a bit taller than him. Obviously, he doesn't go in this necessarily. I haven't tried to see if we could put him in there. I guess maybe if it's empty, we could open it up and see if he will fit.
Are you insane? Get out of here! The curse, it's real! This whole place is a trap! He's out there for
God damn it, Randy, you were supposed to be giving me a latte. And yeah, because of the way his lower body's made, he will not fit inside the coffin. There's just no way he's going to go in there. So after all that time of waiting for an Ardeth Bay figure, was it worth it? I can't say that I'm not a little underwhelmed with the overall figure we got here. But I don't really know how many people other than myself and maybe some other hardcore Universal Monsters fans were really clamoring for an Ardeth Bay figure. There are a lot of good points here. I think the head sculpts are really nice. I think most of the accessories are pretty good. I think where I have trouble is just that the body of this figure is pretty limited in terms of articulation and posability and displayability. And knowing that we've gotten characters from NECA like Ghostface and Jigsaw where they did cloth robes so that we were still able to get a full range of articulation and all that, does make this release feel a lot more limited because it doesn't have that. Especially a character like Ardath Bey, where a lot of the time when he's in this outfit in particular, he's kind of showing Anxanamen the visions of the past and all that, and he's kneeling down next to her. So a lot of the poses Karloff is in while in this costume, he can't do as a figure here. I guess from a practicality standpoint, though, they have at least 2 variants of Jigsaw they could put out there. They have dozens of reasons to reissue Ghostface. I don't know if they're ever going to have another reason to do this robe pattern for a character like this. So I can see where from a business perspective that it may not be something you want to invest too heavily in. But that still sucks at our end because, you know, we're still paying $40 for a figure, regardless of what money NECA does and doesn't save. So I'm on the fence if I could really recommend this figure. I do like it at the end of the day. I am very happy to have it in my collection. And selfishly, I do want to be like, yes, go buy this thing so that NECA sees that there is a market for not just the straight up iconic looks of all the characters, and it could justify doing more stuff that's not the main standard versions of the classic roster of Universal Monsters. So I'm going to give this thing a qualified recommend. If you're as big of a fan of this character and his look as I am, definitely worth grabbing. And honestly, even if you're not like a hardcore fan, I could still say this figure's worth getting. It just may not be the centerpiece of your Universal Monsters collection. Right now, aside from the Kemp House Invisible Man, we don't have any real Universal Monsters on the way from NECA. We do have another entry in their Hammer line with Peter Cushing Van Helsing coming up, which is really exciting. I would really still like to see them go back and do some other characters from these classic movies. In particular, looking at that Vincent Price figure they did, had me thinking, if you're going to do a figure that's just an actor and not necessarily movie specific, maybe he's not famous enough for it to really work. But Edward Van Sloan would be kind of great because he plays a role in Frankenstein, The Mummy, and Dracula. It'd be kind of cool to have like interchangeable versions of him to put in with our monsters. And honestly, still hoping we'll get a Frankenstein's monster and Igor from Son of Frankenstein. I think that would be a really big omission if we never got that in this line. And a Red Death Phantom of the Opera I'm still holding out for. So hey, we got Ardath Bey. Maybe the rest will come. And honestly, some Brendan Fraser Mummy movie stuff would be pretty cool as well. But enough of my wish list. I hope you enjoyed the review. I would have enjoyed it a lot more if I had gotten my cup of coffee.